Hi, my name is Ann Sermons Gillis, and I am interviewing friends and members of Unity. This morning we have a friend of Unity. I want to welcome John Newman. Welcome, John.
Good morning.
Yay, we're so glad to have you here. And I want to start at the very beginning. Where were you born?
The beginning. Well, I came into this world in 1950 in Columbia, South Carolina. Spent the first 33 years of my life there before I moved away. In fact, my first 8 years of my life was spent a little north of Columbia on my grandfather's farm. I had a very rustic upbringing. My parents and I lived in a little shack, and it was indeed just a little shack, uh, just a stone's throw from the farmhouse. And I went to the first and second grade and a little 1 through 12 grade school in a little tiny town called Blythewood, which is just north of Columbia. But all around the Columbia area is where I lived for at least until I was 33 and moved away.
And you live in the Charleston area now.
Yes,
And,
ma'am.
and
Uh,
what,
we
what
we
brought you here?
we moved here in '89. In fact, it was just 6 weeks before Hurricane Hugo, and we were renting a condo. And we came here because my wife had a teaching position at Trident Tech. We had been in Indiana for a few years, where my wife got graduate degrees. And then we moved to Greenwood, South Carolina, where she taught junior high for a year, then got the job here. And it was her dream job, as she's always told me, teaching for, I think, 28 years there. And I had been a bookseller. I had managed bookstores in Columbia and in Bloomington, Indiana. And then I got the job at a bookstore here in Charleston. And worked for that company for many long years at B. Dalton. I don't know if you remember that bookstore chain.
Yes.
I became a library assistant and worked for the Berkeley County Library for a number of years, retired from there. And so books have been my life. I'm a very bookish fellow.
The book man. That's great. That's great. I know that you're married and your wife's
Yes,
name is,
for 43 years we've been
and
married.
what's your wife's name?
I'm sorry.
And what's your wife's name?
Oh, and that's Patty Newman.
And does she
Yeah.
go to Unity? You go to Unity together?
Yes, we do. She's an official member. I am what you call a friend. I did not become an official member, not because I have any beef with Unity, but I fancy myself an independent thinker, and I avoid any official affiliation with any religion. In fact, in my misspent youth, I rejected religion. The religion that I was exposed to early in life was attending the Baptist church with my grandparents. And I just never felt any uh, attraction to that. And my mother took me to a Methodist church, and that was a little better. Not so much the fire and brimstone. The minister happened to be a John Kennedy liberal, and so things were a little looser there. But still, I was unmoved by Christianity. In fact, it seemed to me that the religion of love, as they called it, was more about guilt, punishment, fear, and so I rejected religion. Um, I started college at the University of South Carolina in Columbia when I was 18, and I was the very first person in my family to ever go to college. Although my parents, who never went beyond high school, were always encouraged me to seek education. And one of the prime reasons for going to university at that time was a student deferment. This was during the Vietnam War.
Oh, yeah.
And but so I went about a year and a half, but then a very bad move. I flunked out. I was young and restless and tired of going to school. Hardly ever went to class, so dropped out almost immediately. I got a little letter from the government that said, come and join our army. And so basic and infantry training, Fort Jackson, South Carolina, which is right outside of Columbia. And then I expected to go to Vietnam, but I guess the luck of the draw, I was sent to South Korea, and I spent 14 months on the DMZ there in the North Korea, South Korea border. And that was a very important part of my development intellectually and religiously, I think. I became fascinated by the Oriental culture. So now I'm told I'm not supposed to use that word Oriental. I'm supposed to say Asian. That's not
Okay.
correct. But and I learned Korean, a lot of Korean. I got a book and I learned the alphabet. In fact, I sat down one night in the barracks, and in a few hours, I had learned the alphabet. It's very logical. I started reading signs. I started talking to people. And unlike other GIs who just didn't care, they could not step outside of their Americanism, I wanted to find out about this culture. And I did things like travel around Korea on days off. They have a wonderful bus system, or they did at that time. This was 1970. And the bus system went all over the country. And they even had a stewardess on the bus, passed out tea. She sat in a little seat up front, and they passed the microphone around, and people would sing. And so they handed me the microphone, and I couldn't think of a song except "You Are My Sunshine."
Oh,
I sang that, and it was embarrassing. But I traveled with a Korean soldier that I got to know, who was part of our unit, attached to our unit. And he took me to a famous Buddhist shrine in Korea. And I was extremely interested in that. And I spoke to a Buddhist monk who spoke very good English. And I wanted to ask him about Buddhism. He wanted to talk about the American space program.
yeah.
Fascinated by the moon landing by the United States, and so, which I saw actually in 1969.
Oh, wow.
Uh, watched it on TV, and then I
Yeah.
went outside and looked at the moon, and they're really up there. That's amazing. But anyway, and another thing is, I used to hang out in a little tea room at a town nearby the base, and I met a Korean lady there and fell in love. And when you have a love affair with someone from another culture, that's another way that you learn a very intimate part of their culture. That we eventually broke up, but that was also one of my youthful adventures in the Orient. And whenever I came back from the Army, I wanted to re-enroll in university. I went to the registrar and I said, you see from my record that it was pretty poor before, but I really want to go back to school. He said, don't worry about it. All the veterans who come back from the military, they're very serious then. And so I was readmitted and became a good student. And I eventually ended up with a degree in religious studies, which was comparative religion. And I also took lots of philosophy and history courses. And I used to say that my major was philosophy, because that usually stopped the conversation right there. Nobody knows anything to ask about philosophy. And also, I didn't have to answer that question, what religion are you? Because I really didn't have religion. I was just fascinated by what everyone believed all over the world, all the different religions. And I was very seriously studying Buddhism at that time. And after the army, I grew my hair long, became a hippie, married a hippie chick, and I worked full time as well. The GI Bill paid for my education, but I had to work full time, to support family. It was a pretty rough time. I was either in class or working all the time. But I worked a job as a highway patrol dispatcher many years. And even though I had long hair, no one said anything to me. And I did a good job. In fact, became a shift supervisor. But at USC, after I graduated, I decided I wanted to go back to graduate school. And then another momentous thing happened. I met a lady named Patty there at USC who was in graduate school, and we've been married for 43 years. And Patty was and is more religious than me, uh, but she is so tolerant and so open-minded that she was able to accept me for what I was. I've never really thought of myself as an atheist. I always thought that there was some power, some presence that was unnameable. So I just had to say that I was agnostic, or I really didn't know. In fact, my standard answer for most of the big questions is, I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm trying to have a little humility there. I don't
The,
know.
the
I
great
don't,
philosopher, the great philosopher.
well, I don't know. But anyway, the first time I was at Unity was the memorial service for Homero Lopez's father. And I was struck when I walked in to see all the symbols on the wall of the different faiths. And I thought to myself, now this is very interesting. This is something that I have to look into. Patty and I had attended the Unitarian Church for a while, but we weren't very moved by that. It was more like a lecture society. No one ever said the word God, and it was very cerebral. And the people were nice, but they weren't particularly welcoming. Not to say anything against them. I know they're fine folks. But Unity seemed to be welcoming and tolerant. And whenever I found out the Unity take on religion and on Christianity, it was something that appealed to me. Uh, for instance, the idea of original sin, that we're just horrible wretch just by being born. That's something that I could not accept. However, Unity says original blessing. And I can't answer the question about are humans innately good or innately bad? I don't know. But I refuse to believe in that idea that just by being born, that you're a horrible sinner. Unity seemed to fit. I still haven't joined, not officially, even though I've been going there for over 20 years, because, like I say, I have found in every religion that I studied that there were appealing parts, but there were also dogmas. And unity, dogma is very loose, if we can even call it that. But like the five principles, I really have no argument with them. But all of that is nothing that I want to endorse fully. I go along, I'm a follower, but I don't endorse any religious creed 100%. I guess that really doesn't matter since I don't know the answers, but I have found something pretty fulfilling in going to the Unity Church.
Well, it sounds like your journey maybe was born out of curiosity. It's like, well, what other people think? And you're just curious about a lot of things.
That's true. I'm afraid that it was more intellectual than it was devotional. And not to say that I'm an intellectual. I just read a lot of books. I'm not an intellectual, not really. But the times that I've had moments of great peace or great clarity, was nothing that was like satori, as they say in Zen, or anything like that. But something that was really touched my heart, very emotional, but just not devotional. And one of the things that got me interested in Buddhism was just a little anecdote. On the way to Korea, I was in a plane load of GIs that we landed in Tokyo first before we landed in Seoul, Korea, to be sent to our units. And on the layover there, I went into the terminal in Tokyo and found an English language bookstore, and I bought the book about Zen Buddhism by D.T. Suzuki. And I read that on the plane on the way to Seoul, and I was bewildered by that. Zen, what in the world is this? I didn't understand it at all. And that was one of the motivations for me to seriously study Buddhism when I came back to the States.
Oh, that's neat. Another one of those little coincidences that turns your life in another direction. Well, just moving back a little bit to your personal life, do you have any children?
Yes, we have one daughter, an only child. She's almost 40 now, and she is a librarian. I don't know where she got that idea to work with books. Yeah, and a children's librarian. And we have a granddaughter who will soon turn 7, who is just a firecracker. She's a live wire and brings us a lot of joy.
So, moving back to the spiritual, religious side of things, so you found unity when you went to the funeral,
That's correct. And that would have been over 20 years ago. And that's
and you just liked it and decided
yeah,
to go back.
right. And then we did not immediately go back. I think there might have been some weeks or something before we attended some other events there, and then we sort of sporadically started going back to the service. And Reverend Ed was the minister at that time, and I had a number of conversations with Ed and found out that we had a lot of experiences and attitudes in common. And then after that, we became pretty regular attendees there. And we always loved the music. Brad always comes up with some wonderful musicians. Another thing that I found so attractive about Unity was the music. It was usually a song that had some spiritual meaning or some ethical meaning to it, but it wasn't hymns. I remember singing hymns whenever I was in the Baptist and the Methodist church, and just thinking how awful this was. And um, the philosopher Alan Watts, I don't know if you've ever read any of his books, he was big in the 70s with us hippies.
Yeah.
And he said that he would define church hymns as religious doggerel set to marching music.
Ah,
Experience of hymns. And so the music that they performed at Unity was such a wonderful change.
yes, absolutely it is. Well, in just a few sentences, what would you say your philosophy of life is now?
My philosophy of life, oh my goodness, that's a rather deep subject for someone who's such a simple thinker. But I do believe in some sort of God. Um, I don't know how to define God. I don't know the pronouns he, she, it. I tend to think that I have this emotional feeling that God is female, that that there's a female principle behind the universe. Of course, who knows? I don't know. And I rarely pray, but when I do, it's mostly one of gratitude because uh, I'm here on this earth and I'm experiencing all these wonderful things and terrible things. And it seems like that's a gift to be here. And there was some power that put me here. And my view of that power is something like the Unity take on it. I don't believe that it's judgmental. I don't believe that it's punitive. And I don't know any of that for certain. In fact, I believe that nothing is certain, except maybe that. Maybe there is something certain. But my theology is pretty loose and vague, and I'm satisfied with it.
Well, that's one thing in unity. You don't have to have a belief. You don't have to have a dogma. You don't have to be a member. You, everybody's welcome. Even though we do have some beliefs that we share with people, but you don't have to believe them. That's for sure.
Right. Well, one of the things that keeps me coming back to unity is the people there. Most of us are like-minded. Everyone is welcoming. Everyone is. I feel compassion there, so I'm drawn to it.
Yes. You're going to love this next question.
Oh,
And that, what are some of your favorite books or authors? You did mention the Suzuki book, which was a book on Zen. Um, do you have any other authors or particular books that have been very meaningful to you?
yeah, right. In fiction, I don't know if you know this author, Isaac Bashevis Singer. He's a Jewish man. He was Polish. He became an American citizen. And all of his books have something to do with his experiences as a Jewish man in Europe and the United States and New York. But they all have an incredibly universal theme, even though they're very particular. Uh, and I've taken a lot of my philosophy, such as it is, from Alan Watts, who was, you may have heard of him, but very big during the 60s and 70s, interpreting the Asian religions to Americans. And one of the things that I get from him, I think, is a apology for an acceptance of my laziness when it comes to spiritual practices. Um, I've always thought that striving to be a saint, striving to be a Buddha, and all of that was not necessary. And
Man,
Alan Watts said, um, and I'll have to paraphrase, he says that seeking to destroy the ego is a very egotistical act.
I love it.
This striving to be perfect and totally enlightened. But one thing I don't know what enlightenment is. It's a word and it's a concept, but I've never experienced it. And so my oh, sorry, temporary, sporadic efforts to meditate or to pray, maybe that's okay. That the peace that I find in nature, I grew up in the country, and I've always liked being in the woods, hiking, camping, and the peace that I find there is more important than meditating, uh, twisting myself into pretzel shapes in yoga and praying and a serious spiritual exercise. Um, my best spiritual exercise is just to sit and try to not think.
Yeah, there's a bumper sticker that says meditation is not what you think.
I like that one. I'm gonna have to remember that.
Well, John, do you have any passions or hobbies?
Well, I used to want to be an artist. I have drawn a lot. I've had some very, what I think are some very good pictures. Almost never painted. Very few experiences of that. But I used to draw all the time as a kid. And writing, I write poetry. I'm sure it's bad poetry, but it's just mostly for the family. I don't aspire to publish anything. And I'm writing a pseudo memoir. It's just some chapters in my life, things that I've done, and people I've seen, etc. I enjoy doing that. I used to be an athlete, that's a runner. I ran for 20 years, just jogging, but I would cover many miles. And then the knee gave out. And then I became a very avid cyclist. My father-in-law, Patty's father, was a sportsman, an athlete, and gave me a European bike. And I put thousands of miles on that bike. And it was wonderful. The endorphins would kick in, as they say, whenever if you're a long distance runner or serious cyclist, and it's like a high. But then some years ago, I crashed. I got a very serious back shoulder injury, and now I really can't ride the bike anymore. I do as much walking as I can, but probably I'm as healthy as I am because of those exercises that I did before, and camping and hiking. In my youth, I was trying to do that as much as possible. I get in my little truck, head to North Carolina to the mountains and camp.
Do you
I'm
still?
afraid in my old age we don't do that so much.
Okay. All right. So you mentioned, I think you answered this question as I was going up what your spiritual practices are. And I think what you're saying, your spiritual practices, you like to sit and clear your mind, and you also like to be in nature. Other than those things, are there any other spiritual practices that you have? And reading.
Right, reading. I read about religion and spirituality still, and history. I love to read history.
And
But I'm sorry,
what area of history are you interested in?
uh, particularly American history and Native American history. I've always been drawn to that Native American spirituality, if I understand it correctly.
Right.
And that all goes along with the idea of a connection to nature, oneness with nature.
Absolutely.
I'm afraid that my spiritual practices are rather mundane.
Well, I don't think spiritual practices require a lot of complication. As one spiritual literature says, simplicity is difficult for twisted minds. So maybe sometimes we do too many things to try to grasp or reach what's already present.
Right. Yeah. The best enlightenment experiences I've had, if you would even call them that, was whenever I let go of any necessity to understand what enlightenment is.
Absolutely. Yeah, very, very, yes. I'd say grasshopper to that one. It is true. It's been so nice to have you. I wonder if there's any parting words or anything you'd like to say in closing.
I can't think of anything other than to emphasize that unity is something that's been very important to me, and I believe that there are other people that I know who are non-religious who would probably benefit greatly from hearing the unity take on religion.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.